Hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Khalid Ahmed, and I welcome you to this thought-provoking panel discussion on generative AI, not just a chatbot. Today, we embark on a journey into the realm of artificial intelligence, a journey that promises to redefine how we live, work, and interact with the world around us. The impact of generative AI is far-reaching, extending its transformative influences across diverse sectors and industries, from healthcare and finance to marketing and the creative arts. Generative AI is revolutionizing the way we work, think, and create. It's redefining the very essence of human machine collaboration, pushing the boundaries of what's achievable. But with great power comes great responsibility. How do we harness the potential of this technology while ensuring it benefits society as a whole? How can we safeguard against misuse and misinformation? These are just some of the questions that demands our attention. Today, we have with us George Lynch, Head of Technology Advisory, and Ramaraju Indukuri, Senior VP and Head of AI Practice at Nashtec, who will guide us through this complex landscape. They will share their insights, experiences, and perspectives on the profound transformation driven by generative AI. Together, we'll explore the opportunities, challenges, and ethical considerations that lie on this uncharted path. So, let's embark on this intellectual journey as we navigate the uncharted waters of generative AI, understanding its role in transforming industries and shaping the future. So, without any further ado, let's get introduced to our panel and begin the discussion. Hey, George, how are you doing?
Hi, Khaled. Good to see you. I know it's good morning or good afternoon or good evening to some people on the call. Those who don't know me, my name is George. I'm the Head of Technology Advisory at Nashtec. And I was just thinking the other day that I actually studied artificial intelligence over 30 years ago at university. And at the end of that course, we concluded that AI was an interesting mathematical problem, but would never become a practical reality. I think we've all proven, I've certainly been proven wrong there. So I've been spent a lot of my career helping lots of companies figure out how to, how do they do the best with the money they've got to transform themselves. And of course, generative AI is now a very real, potential solution for lots of people. It comes with some potential risks and some imagined risks. So let's talk about that today. I'd like to then hand over and introduce a great colleague of mine who's based out in Chicago, Ram.
Hi, George. Hi, Khalid. Good to
Hi,
see
Ram.
you, everybody. My name is Ram Indukuri. I live and work out of Chicago. I'm head of AI at Nashtec. My tryst with AI goes back to my education back in '93 when I studied mechanical engineering and particularly focused on robotics. There used to be something called fuzzy logic, if you recall. Things have gone a long way since then. We have generative AI and very exciting developments in this field. In Nashtec since 2015, I've been helping customers implement various kinds of use cases, forecasting systems, natural language processing, image recognition based applications. I'm more into core engineering of AI, not particularly data science. However, I have some experience working with data science teams along my career.
Great, great. And thank you for the introduction, Ram and George. And it's a total pleasure to have you both today. Now, so what we'll love to do in the next 35-40 minutes that we have today to just dive a little deeper into this topic and love to get to hear from you all about your actual experiences you all have had. And maybe to start with my first question around, how do you define generative AI? And we've all been hearing about ChatGPT and everything like that. So, I mean, is there anything more to it? Ram, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, generative AI is a class of algorithms that help us generate new content, which is based on the existing content versus the generalized AI and machine learning. If you think of it, it answers a question, a prediction, which is essentially at the core predicting a label based on given access, whereas generative AI in some different format is going to generate new content, based on pre-trained existing content. That's kind of definition of generative AI. Of course, everybody knows ChatGPT, which is basically text-based language models, but same thing can be extended into audios, videos, in any kind of digital content. The same thing can be extended.
Great, great. And also hearing someone saying, it is kind of a genie. So, and who doesn't want a genie in their life, right? Great. So like you said, Ram, the usage of in terms of audios, videos, text, and more. And that directly takes me to the next automatic question that comes in is, how is generative AI used across industries? George, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And are there any industries that can benefit more than others?
So yeah, it's a really good question, Khaled, actually, and I had to think about this a few days ago. Generative AI, as it stands at the moment, has been, if you read some of the press, it's going to solve world hunger. But actually, there are genuinely lots of practical applications of generative AI, and I thought I'd just mention a few that we have sort of come across in the last 18 months to 12 months. And some of them are sort of really obvious, but worth thinking about, and some are a wee bit more out there, and maybe in your own particular industry, you think, well, you know what, that might apply to me. So the obvious kind of contenders here are in the marketing industry, where Gen AI can create some fantastic content and truly personalized content. So there's this nirvana in the marketing industry where we absolutely personalize content for you as an individual. This is very different from, if you think about if any of you've known the film Blade Runner, where there was this 100-foot tall image being blasted from a building. That's very unpersonalized marketing, but we're getting to that point where these things are going to start popping up in various bits of content. So I think marketing's an obvious candidate where we'll see some great efficiencies from Gen AI. Another one which has been touted and actually practically used is in the insurance industry, and that's particularly around about automated claims reporting. So not only can Gen AI be used to take some large language model and some local knowledge to generate a report for a claim, but it can also actually be used to analyse the images and pictures and descriptions of the actual claim itself, which might well lead to potential fraud detection, but hopefully leads to general overall satisfaction and cost reduction in that industry. One of our own particular industries within NashTech is we are very interested in the application of generative AI in higher education. When it first came out, there was a sort of like, how do we control this? How do we let it out? How do we make best value? So I think higher education is really interesting. And one particular use case within higher education that we've come across is intelligent wellbeing. What does that mean? Well, we are in an age now where the cohort of students come from, frankly, a different era from me. They are digital natives. They're very comfortable in asynchronous communications, and they will live their life digitally. And it turns out from some psychologists looking into behaviours that actually they're much more likely to engage in a meaningful conversation with in an asynchronous manner and not with a human. I think this is something to come. So actually we could train some of our generative AI capabilities to effectively listen for tone and pick up the language that's being used by a student in an asynchronous chat. And that be things like, can I get an extension to my essay deadline? Why is that? Why is that student asking that question? Is there something else behind that? And can the generative AI, the chatbot in this instance, have a meaningful and useful conversation about the student's well-being? It's a bit out there, but we think that's something that might be very practical, and we've got lots of clients who are thinking about it. The other one I would think about is procurement. Again, probably a bit more traditional. It's one of the areas that's been identified for some time, but really great for procurement officers and others where they just want to generate really good contracts. They want to generate really good invoices. They don't want to go into systems of record and figure things out. And indeed, there's a company called Pactum, for example, who uses NLG natural language generation just to automatically create, interestingly, contract negotiations, which is typically human-to-human conversation, and sometimes some people feel uncomfortable with that. So a very interesting one. And finally, the list goes on, Khaled, so thanks for asking. For those of you who are probably following both at the same time in interest and amazement, there was the OpenAI Dev Day today last week with Sam Altman, and they just have come up with a whole bunch of new Gen AI use cases. In fact, using generative AI to create virtual agents, no programmers required. Interesting. So we're seeing lots and lots of different things coming up. But one of the ones I think is really interesting, and it's something I'd like to talk to you, Ram, about. We actually got an example where the car industry, where it's trying to create autonomous cars, is now using generative AI to generate synthetic data to train the AI in the car. Rather than trying to create real-world scenarios, it's actually creating videos and scenarios for the driving systems. And in fact, NVIDIA are using something called the Generative Adversarial Network to do that. It's really interesting for us as technologists that are on the call. But I was just thinking out loud, Ram, that the one industry I haven't mentioned is our industry, the tech industry, and whether or not we're going to be the great adopters or the ones that say it's not for us. So it'd be really good to understand, from your point of view, how we think Gen AI might affect our own industry.
Very good question, George. I think, if you look inside what we are doing at Nasdaq and broadly in our industry, a lot of companies are investing, obviously, in assisting programming itself. I think GitHub Copilot has been pretty predominant, pretty common. We are providing these tools to our developers in expediting and making them more efficient. But the other side is we are also exploring, it's not in production yet, but we are seriously looking at ways to test the software. The Gen AI generating test cases is a great productivity builder, assures much better quality. I think, in general, there is a significant interest in improving the efficiency, making our developers think more creative at a higher level, like a design level, and not having to deal with, simpler tasks like testing and, writing complex code delegated to Gen AI. That's what we are looking at.
And it's a really good point, Ram. I think that those of us who are on the call who have any developer experience will realise that we're all naturally lazy people, and we spend an awful lot of time trying to make ourselves as lazy as possible by all the frameworks. And I remember 4GL and all these utopian dreams that would make a developer just focus on the creative. I think we're getting to the point with Gen AI where some of the productivity tools and gains that we could get out of that would be a really, a real dynamic change. So yeah, it's really interesting. Thanks, Ram.
Yeah, it's introducing some complexities though. Like, for example, the code that is generated by Gen AI, traditionally we have a very rigorous, once somebody writes the code, somebody has to look through the code and make sure it is good. When it is written by Gen AI, you can see some flavor to the kind of code, and it's not usual flavor that we see with our own developers. So we run into those kind of issues, but we are working through them. We're helping developers, do things in the right way so that we don't deal with these kind of issues. And of course, the other thing, George, tools like Figma, they are embedding Gen AI and AI in general into the tools. The other day, we were trying to define the screen flow, and Figma can generate those screen flows for you. And you can go in and then just adjust few things, and you will have a reasonable flow to start with. So that's another way our industry is adopting to Gen AI. But in general, there is a lot of excitement, a lot of interest, a lot of commitment to using Gen AI in our industry and improving productivity and eliminating tedious tasks.
Yeah, cool.
Great. I mean, some awesome points. I mean, before we move ahead, I would like to remind our audience to ask any questions they have for the panel. Just put your questions on the Q&A section, and we'll pick it from there. All right, moving ahead. I mean, we all are using AI in some form or the other. Like you said, George, I mean, a lot of it can be customized as well. So we've been seeing its useful side. But Ram, can you talk us through some concerns about generative AI?
Oh, that's, I'm sure all the audience will also recognize the huge concern. There are multiple varieties of concerns. There are legal concerns, there are technical concerns, and there are usage concerns. Let's go, kind of one by one. Obviously, the technical concerns are, how accurate the model is going to be. Gen AI broadly is, kind of B2C. It touches the lives of people. We expect certain level of quality in the models that are being generated. One thing that I particularly noticed is, we developed a forecasting platform for a retailer. I understand, forecasts may not be accurate. There are metrics to measure. We implement ML ops to fix it, so on and so forth. But when a customer signs into ChatGPT and asks a question and it doesn't, give a good answer, it reflects on the company that is providing. So, that's, that level of accuracy is a big concern when you look at it technically. The second technical concern is, diversity. Are we covering all aspects of the data? I mean, are questions about one particular subsection are being answered correct or not? And the last thing is the performance. This has been a big problem. While we have good accuracy and good data sets, the performance of LLMs could be a challenge, especially if you are using private LLMs. You need significant amount of compute power to serve, in technical language, to serve the model. The GPUs are becoming, at the moment, scarce. So, these are some technical concerns. The legal concerns obviously are, every government is coming out with policies, and we need to abide by the policies. I'm sure, George, there is intense activity going on in Europe. What do you hear in general from Europe, before I come to what's going on in US?
We know the US have got their AI Bill of Rights, but we know that the European Union has very recently, and indeed Elon Musk visited the UK to talk to the UK Prime Minister very recently. It's interesting that the governments are trying to govern something that may well be, I'm not saying the horse is bolted by any stretch of the imagination, but they've come late to the party. And indeed, there's a difference between team being able to stand up in front of a judge and get something to go in your favour when it comes to Gen AI. What's really interesting from a risk perspective is provably verifiable AI that can be trusted, not just by some general model, but by some mathematical application, which is really interesting. And there's some great people out there like Max Tegmark who are thinking about how they can actually use Gen AI to prove Gen AI is provably correct. So it's interesting what's happening in terms of catch-up. I think we're in a bit of a catch-up mode.
Interesting, yeah. In US, President Biden and the team has come up with AI Bill of Rights. went through a long document, but long story short, there are 2 or 3 critical points. One is the governments are beginning to ask for transparency of the models that companies are building. Initially they're going to start with companies having to share the test data. And then, as governments become more smarter about AI, they have the capability to do so. They will be obviously subjecting companies to some automated way of, governing and evaluating the models. So that's coming. So testing becomes a very, very critical aspect of developing AI. I advise all our audience, if you are embarking on a AI journey, particularly generative AI, keep in mind you have to have a good operations process to conduct the right kind of testing, and also document and be ready to be transparent about it. The second aspect of legal concern is providing options to our consumers in case if they don't trust the models that we are developing. Colorado Department of Insurance has come up with guidelines. If you are rejecting, providing insurance to someone, based on whatever AI model that it is suggesting, it is possible that it is doing because of race, color, ethnicity.
Yeah, a bias, an unintended bias. Yeah.
So we need to make sure those things are not happening. And the last thing is usage concern. Okay, we took care of the technical concerns, legal concerns. Now comes the usage concern, which is let's say you are providing a chatbot to fix, I don't know, $1,000 TV, and the instructions go wrong and you end up breaking. Who is liable for that? Obviously you are. So how do you make
Not
sure?
Me. Not me, I didn't break it, but I get your point.
So I think eventually we will be judged, because we have been helping our customers build these systems. So we need to make sure these things are accurate. Fortunately, there are several alternatives in front of us. I won't go into the details, but certain kind of implementations like RAG, which is search-based implementation of chatbots, tend to be more accurate, less hallucinistic, and easy to track the output. But these are some concerns. I think it's a long answer to a short question, but I'm sure these are things which are very, very important. Of course, there is a whole thing about how do you test generative AI. I think there is increased interest in automated testing.
And that's potentially a subject for another webinar. That's a big enough subject in its own right. Yeah, really interesting, Ram. Thanks for that. So that's really great. We've got a good idea of some of the risks, and they are real and imagined in equal measure. But I don't know if Khaled, you'd like me to maybe give the audience a bit of a thought on what they might do if they're on the Gen AI journey, and what they do next potentially. Would that be okay?
Totally.
Cool. So we've talked about Gen AI and some of the risks and some of the benefits and where you might apply them. But what would you be? Maybe you're a technologist, you're an architect, you're a tech leader who's trying to advise your board, and you're getting a bit of pressure from the board down about doing something about Gen AI because everybody else is. So here's some steps that we have found that reasonably work. They're non-linear. It's not that you go from A to Z and it's all great, but just some of them. So one of the things I would say is look at your existing technology stack. Are you technically ready to embrace generative AI? And if you're not, that's okay. You don't need to have an on-prem data center with lots of GPUs that you can do fine-tuning on, or even create your own models. But maybe you are an organization. The important thing is to do is audit where you are from a tech stack perspective. You may already have done some predictive analytics using machine learning models. So you're kind of aware of what models are, and you might have some compute available to you, but just have a look at what you've got and see whether or not you can potentially access some open source models and all that great stuff. Kind of obvious, but it's worth saying. The other thing, of course, is analysis, paralysis by analysis. Don't wait to get started with Gen AI. I think Ram and Cal would be my advice. And my advice always is to look at a lighthouse approach. Pick a use case that you think might well work for your organization and your industry. And you effectively try before you really buy. So you do some investment, you do some, you figure out what good looks like at the end of that, and you sort of test and learn. I think that's really important. And it creates an enthusiasm for Gen AI in your own business, because there may be some of your own developers, your own customer service agents, people who might be a bit worried about everything to do with Gen AI. So create that lighthouse project and create some enthusiasm, and be prepared to answer the hard questions. And in fact, there are different ways you can do that. So there's a consumer model, which is probably lots of the COTS applications you're using right now. Those vendors are saying, hey, we've now embedded Gen AI in Microsoft 365 Copilot, or Zendesk have their own plugin. It might come at a cost, but it comes at low risk because the risk is on the vendor. Embedded Gen AI is where you just wrap a Gen AI API in your own branding. So again, that's a possibility. But one of the things we've found really interesting is creating the one that you talked about, RAG, where you actually augment the large language model with your own enterprise data, and that gives a very tailored experience for you, both your internally and externally. But you could really go far, and we've been looking at this ourselves as a company, which is actually looking to extend Gen AI models through fine tuning. I think that's a step. That's the next big step in terms of money, time, and effort. And then if you're really big, and if you're really big, I don't know why you're on this call, but you might well want to build your own custom models. And actually, we think at some point, building custom models will become accessible to many companies, but not being right just now. I'll very quickly go over some other pointers. Don't just expect the CTO to be the person who's now the head of AI. You need to create a cross-functional team, get advice from maybe data scientists you've got in the organization, maybe people who look at risk, legal, finance, create a cross-functional team that have a collective responsibility for looking at Gen AI. And you might well then get yourself a nice innovation group for anything else that comes down the line. And I was going to talk about talent myself, because I got a view on what kind of talent you need in the organization. But I'll very quickly hand over to Ram and just ask you that, Ram. We talk about, we've talked in the past about data literacy, but now do we need to live in the world of Gen AI literacy? Do we need PhD data scientists in our organization, or do we not? How do we train the existing workforce? Just your initial quick thoughts.
I think it depends definitely on the use case, George. Of course, if you're doing something like a chatbot, you're building something to help your customers get some answers. You're building on top of OpenAI, closed source models. Probably the level of engineering required is not so much. It's definitely the regular application development skills. But I think one big thing is which is common across whatever you do is sufficient level of prompt engineering knowledge. You should be trained, or at least learn how to interact with these LLMs. It's like using mouse and keyboard, a little bit more complex, but definitely a structured way of learning prompt engineering would go a long way. Probably we are already doing it, thanks to ChatGPT. All of us are, typing in stuff and then figuring, oh, this is not what I want. But that's a common skill, of course. The complexity of skills can, go sufficiently up, just like you mentioned, if you are trying to build your own LLM in your own domain. Like, for example, Bloomberg's, the financial model. Obviously, you need much more engineering depth, much more investment. on one side, you need to have the data science understanding of neural networks and architectures. On the other side, the engineering aspect of acquiring the compute, building the scalable clusters, training, optimizing is the second aspect. It's kind of funny, how much investment is going to this. The other day we were trying to acquire NVIDIA additional GPUs for our own internal efforts, and Google came back. We are hitting the ceiling there. The allocated NVIDIA powered A100 machines, and we had to go back to Google, explain them why we need more. It's kind of counterintuitive. We should be able to get the resources we need, but it's so much in shortage. So it's amazing how much companies are investing in Gen AI nowadays.
Yeah, all the more to get on. Yeah, all the more why people should think about their lighthouse projects and what they do. Yeah, interesting though.
One thing, George, particularly our customers who are in the creative areas, like for example, people who generate content for commercial purpose, that is going to have a huge impact on their business. Those businesses who create stuff, have to invest in generative AI, at least, if you have competition, assuming you have competition. And in those cases, the immediate need is you need to step up your game. You need to build the engineering depth as well as the data science depth in the organization, and attempt to take the moonshots, because most of these creative applications will be impacted by Gen AI.
Cool. Thanks, Ram. So, Khaled, I think you were mentioning on the chat, we've got a few questions.
We've got some few questions now. The first question is, on the developer's point, any thoughts on the new roles and skill sets which will be needed? Example, prompt engineering.
I'll take that one because Ram's obviously kind of talked about this already, but one of the ones, do you know how you think you've made a term up and then you find out it's already been used? So like way back late last year, I remember thinking, oh, I wonder if you need prompt engineers. Now, it turns out I wasn't the first person to think about prompt engineering. It was something that had already, probably a term that had been coined and I'd heard and then decided I'd made it up myself. I'm not that clever. But the point is that, generative AI, whilst it appears to be revolutionary, is actually evolutionary. We're building on, quite a few number of years of machine learning. Gen AI is a subdiscipline of AI and machine learning is a subdiscipline of that, and then deep learning, et cetera, et cetera. So there are people out there and there are roles out there that already have the foundational capabilities to embrace Gen AI. But I think the one that stands out the most is, so I'd say the two things that stand out the most, and it's the arms race. It's the prompt engineer. It's a slightly more softer skill. Ram and I talked about this the other day. So it might not be that a very logical, somebody who's used to writing if then else and case loops and very Boolean logic code may not be the best person to write prompts. So we might well see some of people from the creative industry who understand tone, behavior, some counterintuitive language, which is particular to the English language, and then will be particular to other languages across the world, where there's a nuance in understanding the underlying semantic meaning of the prompt context. So I think that's going to be really interesting to see where those skills come from. Will it come from software engineering? Will it come from business analysis? Will it come from the data space itself? So I'll be really interested in there. The other one I would quickly say, Khaled and Ram, which is the kind of the arms race, which is the tester. So it's a different type of test that we now need. We ourselves are looking at prompt injection as a method of confusing the large language model to actually giving the game away when in fact you've crafted a very nice prompt that shouldn't have done that. So again, it's going to be really interesting because testers think on the absolute pass and the absolute fail. Generative AI just throws up a whole new grey area, which is going to be really interesting. So I think that would be the two areas I would think we need to consider.
Yeah. And you talk about testing, George. I mean, so next question is about testing only. What about testing of AI? What's the process for testing?
So it's a really good point. Go on, Ram.
Sure. Yeah. I think, testing is very close to my heart. So there are a couple of things. I mean, obviously, when Gen AI came up within Nashtec, we have a very mature testing team, and we have a specific team that addresses testing of LLMs. So we are discovering, better practices, smarter ways to test LLMs. Obviously, there are a whole bunch of frameworks and metrics. We are beginning to implement and help our customers doing automated testing of LLMs. There is Stanford Helm, which is an open source project that has come out with different metrics for evaluating LLMs. Within testing, one dominant trend and very exciting area is to use LLMs themselves to generate the test data to test the LLMs. There are frameworks, Arise.ai, it's a relatively mature startup, has come up with a library called Phoenix. There are multiple libraries available. Microsoft has certain libraries. Obviously, it needs a little bit more technical depth. So we are using those automated testing and test generation, but we are augmenting all of it with human testing. All said and done, AI is probabilistic, which means there is a certain level of uncertainty and inaccuracy. Certain kind of applications, like in hospital and medical services industry, it's paramount that we have the results do not create unforeseen circumstances. So obviously, the testing is going to evolve. It's going to become more mature. MLOps plays a big role when you train these models, when you implement these systems. You need to make sure there is constant vigilance, automated testing, metrics being observed and reacted to.
Great. Thank you, Ram.
The only other one I'd point people to, Khaled, would be OpenAI themselves have got their evals framework, which is actually the framework for evaluating and testing the behavior of LLMs. So again, to Ram's point, the people who are creating these great potential tools for us they are actually thinking about how they can provably test their own, particularly the behavior of AIs and LLMs. So yeah, worth looking. It's just like Git repo, really interesting.
Yeah.
Just to emphasize.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, Khalid. Yeah, just to emphasize, OpenAI is assuring its customers that if there are any legal risks, OpenAI will pay for it.
Correct.
Which is very interesting. You can think of it in two ways, right? One is if you used these closed source models, you get the some level of assurance on legal risks. On the other side, it's admitting that there is a legal risk in doing so, and what part will be covered by OpenAI, what part will not be covered. It's getting into the legal domain. Like, for example, if I do some mistake and build something on top of OpenAI, will OpenAI pay for it? So there are a lot of questions, but I think that emphasizes how much importance we need to attach to the testing. So yeah, spend some time on it.
Thank you. We'll take one more question in the interest of time. But I mean, if anyone has any more question, feel free to put that on. We'll try to answer all your questions offline. All right. The next question is, there will obviously be a need for global legislation to better govern generative AI. How complex a process will that be, considering the 8-10 years it took for GDPR to become the norm?
Yeah, it's a good one. Answer this together, Ram. I think so. There is no easy answer here, and I'm kind of reminded of. I mean, I don't know if anybody in the call has sons or daughters who are of a digital native age, but I always have this concept of legislation in Fortnite where you're playing this game and the control keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the Wild West gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So there's a balancing act between how can you apply legislation globally when there will be states, nation states, who will, for very obvious reasons, decide not to be part of that game, and they may well want to, for example, reverse engineer some large language models so they can do it themselves. So the practical application, a legislative level, other than it's the carrot and stick thing, Ram. I think there has to be enough of a reason for companies and organisations and individuals to want to abide by those legal statutes and how they put in place. And there'll be some way we can do that, but there's also got to be some stick. What happens if, to the point that Ram's made earlier, something goes wrong and your company's brand is affected badly, or one of your customers is affected badly, etc., etc. So there's a lot to think about there. I do think, I said this before earlier, I think the way forward for this is that we use mathematics and science to solve this problem, right? Which if we use provably safe AI, we can confidently, because we cannot break the rules of physics, we can use maths to actually prove that AI is in and of itself safe. Not that there is the absence of risk, but that it's actually safe to use. If I'm being honest, that's just at the kind of speculative white paper stage at the moment. But until we have a way in which legislation can be applied, it's kind of only as good as the paper it's written on, would be my personal view, not professional view, personal view, to be clear, in case I get into trouble for saying that. Ram, what do you think?
I have very strong opinions on this legislation, George. I feel we failed to. This is, by the way, a very good question. I feel we failed as an industry to do a good job on GDPR. How many companies, have a website where you could go and ask, tell me what do you know about me? And GDPR is supposed to enforce the company give you a document within prescribed time about all the information they collected about you. Just try it on any airline or any company, you will get nothing. It's a law, but it's not implemented. And on the other side, being an engineer, if you think of the systems that we develop, we have been doing this for like, I don't know, 60, 70 years. And how difficult it is to find where we store the personally identifiable information in our systems and, having the metadata about it. So we failed miserably. I hope that doesn't happen with AI. I think we are heading in the right direction where governments are recognizing the seriousness and implementing these legislations. I do hope they start enforcing this much more rigorously than GDPR. So I'm expecting, looking at the way industry is reacting to these suggestions of legislation are very positive. I expect the AI legislation to take effect much, much faster than GDPR. So probably, I would say within a couple of years, we will see at least large companies, submitting the testing data and providing the
Wow.
human alternatives to AI models. So
And it's really interesting, Ram, because I'm typically the glass half full kind of guy on these things, and I'm the glass half empty on this particular one. But it's great that you're the positive and I'm the negative. That's good. Sorry, Khaled, I think we've probably run out of time, but that was good to chat that through.
Yeah, I mean, we are almost on time. And before we go, I mean, I want to thank our panelists, George and Ram, for all your insights. We've had a lot of different interesting stories on how generative AI is used and applied across industries, the concerns surrounding Gen AI, where to start, how to plan it, and the steps for leaders to ensure they balance opportunity and risk. Thank you once again.
Thanks, everyone.
So, I mean, yeah,
Thanks,
I mean,
everyone.
we all also had a great audience. I mean, I would also like to thank the audience for being such a wonderful, interactive audience. Thank you for your patience and time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.